line dancing,
line dancing,
line drawing,
line drawing,
lineman,
lineman,
line manager,
line manager,
line management,
line management,
linen,
linen,
bed linen, table linen, a linen jacket,
linen cupboard,
linen cupboard,
line of scrimmage,
line of scrimmage,
line out,
line out,
line printer,
line printer,
liner,
liner,
a dustbin liner,
nappy liners,
An ocean liner.
liner note,
liner note,
linesman,
linesman,
line-up,
Line-up.
This was his first match in the starting lineup. This was his first match in the starting lineup.
The lineup included top bands Prodigy and Radiohead.
A wonderful lineup of programs for Christmas in the new year. A wonderful lineup of programs for Christmas in the new year. A wonderful lineup of programs for Christmas in the new year.
ling,
Ling.
A duckling.
princelings,
linger,
linger,
a taste that lingers in your mouth,
Unfortunately, the tax will linger on until April.
they lingered over coffee and missed the last bus. They lingered over coffee and missed the last bus.
I spent a week at Candlesteg and could happily have lingered on. I spent a week at Candlesteg and could happily have lingered on. Mike let his eyes linger on her face. Mike let his eyes linger on her face.
There's no need to linger over this stage of the interview. There's no need to linger over this stage of the interview.
He surprised all the doctors by lingering on for several weeks.
lingerie,
lingerie,
lingering,
lingering,
Any lingering hopes of winning the title soon disappeared.
Mr. Wilkins suffered a lingering death.
the lingering aroma of chocolate,
lingo.
lingo,
I'd like to go to Greece, but I don't speak the lingo.
academic lingo,
lingua franca,
lingua franca,
English is the lingua franca in many countries.
linguini,
linguini,
Linguist,
linguist,
linguistic,
linguistic,
A child's linguistic development.
linguistics,
linguistics,
liniment,
liniment,
lining,
lining,
A jacket with a silk lining.
the lining of the womb,
Link.
link,
Police think the murders are linked.
Some birth defects are linked to smoking during pregnancy.
Our economy is inextricably linked with America's.
A love of nature links the two poets.
Exactly how do we link words to objects? Strong family ties still link them together.
the pipe must be linked to the cold water supply,
The climbers were linked together by ropes. The climbers were linked together by ropes.
A long bridge links Venice and the mainland.
he walked with her, linking arms,
He denied reports linking him to Colombian drug dealers. He denied reports linking him to Colombian drug dealers.
Pay increases will now be linked to performance. Pay increases will now be linked to performance.
local terminals are linked to the central computer,
How can I find out who has linked to my blog?
This point links in with our earlier discussion.
The minister's visit was scheduled to link in with the meeting in Harare.
The train links up with the ferry at Dover.
The next stage is to link the film up with a soundtrack.
All these PCs are linked up to the network.
The Internet allows people from all over the world to link up for chat sessions. We linked up with the Daily Express to help run the campaign.
The link between drug use and crime. There are a number of links between the two theories.
The close link between teacher and student. The company has strong links with big investors.
Organisers of the project hope that international links will be forged.
For elderly people, TV is a vital link with the outside world.
The office has direct computer links to over 100 firms. The office has direct computer links to over 100 firms.
Send an email to the above address to report a broken link.
Linkage.
Linkage.
The linkage between wages and prices.
Linking verb.
Linking verb.
Linking word.
Linking word.
Link up.
Link up.
Linnet.
Linnet.
Lino.
Lino.
Lino cut.
Lino cut.
Linoleum.
Linoleum.
Linotype.
Linotype.
Linseed.
Linseed.
Linseed oil.
Linseed oil.
Lint.
Lint.
Lintel.
Lintel.
Linux. Linux.
Lion.
Lion.
The firm has captured the lion's share of the UK market. The firm has captured the lion's share of the UK market. Lioness.
Lioness.
Lion-hearted.
Lion-hearted.
Lionize.
Lionize. Lip. Lip.
His bottom lip was swollen. She had big eyes and full lips.
Matt opened the door with a smile on his lips. Matt opened the door with a smile on his lips.
Marty kissed me right on the lips. Stephen pursed his lips with distaste. Stephen pursed his lips with distaste.
The old road that ran along the lip of the gorge.
Don't give me any of your lip.
An actress whose name is on everyone's lips.
Lip balm.
Lip balm.
Lip gloss.
Lip gloss.
Lipid.
Lipid.
Liposuction.
Liposuction.
Lippy.
Lippy.
Wait a minute, I'll just put a bit of lippy on.
Lip read.
Lip read.
Lip ring.
Lip ring.
Lip salve.
Lip salve.
Lip service.
Lip service.
Organisations that pay lip service to career development. Organisations that pay lip service to career development.
Lip smacking. Lip smacking. Lip smacking recipes.
Lipstick.
Lipstick.
Lipstick lesbian. Lipstick lesbian.
Lip sync.
Lip sync.
Liquefy.
Liquefy.
Liqueur.
Liqueur.
Liquefaction.
Liquefaction.
Liquid.
Liquid.
Add a little more liquid to the sauce. Children take antibiotics in liquid form.
Liquid.
Children take antibiotics in liquid form. Liquid soap.
Their shares are more liquid than those of many smaller companies. Their shares are more liquid than those of many smaller companies. Their shares are more liquid than those of many smaller companies.
Liquid green eyes.
Liquid assets.
Liquid assets.
Liquidate.
Liquidate.
The stock was sold to liquidate the loan.
Liquidation.
Liquidation.
Hundreds of small businesses went into liquidation.
Liquidator.
Liquidator.
Liquidity.
Liquidity.
Liquidize.
Liquidize.
Liquidizer.
Liquidizer.
Liquitab. Liquitab.
Liquor.
Liquor.
Licorice.
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 Liquor store.
Liquor store.
Lira.
Lira.
Lisp.
Lisp.
She speaks with a slight lisp.
Lissom.
Lissom.
List.
List.
Make a list of all the things you have to do.
The first person on my list is Mrs. Gilling.
A good car is high on my list of priorities. The guidebook lists 1,000 hotels and restaurants.
Several passengers were listed in critical condition.
The case was listed for trial in the Crown Court. The case was listed for trial in the Crown Court.
Listed.
Listed.
Listen.
Listen.
Listen, there's a strange noise in the engine.
We sat around listening to music. The whole class was listening attentively.
Liz stood still and listened hard.
Listen, I want you to come with me. I told him not to go, but he just wouldn't listen.
I wish I'd listened to Dad.
She refused to listen to reason.
Listen for the moment when the music changes.
I must remember to listen in to the news.
It sounded like someone was listening in on us.
Listen out for the baby in case she wakes up.
Hey everybody, listen up. Have a listen to this new album.
Listenable.
Listenable.
Listener.
Listener.
A new program for younger listeners.
Listening device.
Listening device.
Listeria.
Listeria.
Listing.
Listing.
A listing of all households in the district.
Listless.
Listless.
The heat was making me listless.
List price.
List price.
Listserv.
Listserv.
Lit.
Lit.
French lit. French lit.
Litany.
Litany.
An endless litany of complaints.
Light.
Light.
Light beer.
Some people see cohabiting as marriage light. Socialism is communism light.
Liter.
Leader.
Literacy.
Literacy.
A new adult literacy campaign.
Literal.
Literal.
A trade war is not a war in the literal sense.
Literally.
Literally.
The name of the cheese is Dolce Latte, literally meaning sweet milk.
I said I felt like quitting, but I didn't mean it literally.
She takes the Bible literally.
The Olympic Games were watched by literally billions of people.
Dad was literally blazing with anger.
Literary. Literary.
A literary prize.
Literary criticism.
A literary style of writing.
A literary woman.
Literate.
Literate.
Literati.
Literati.
Literature.
Literature.
He has read many of the major works of literature. Italian literature.
Literature on the history of science.
Several cases of mercury poisoning have been recorded in the literature.
Sales literature.
Lithe.
Lithe.
The strong lithe bodies of gymnasts.
Lithium.
Lithium.
Lithograph.
Lithograph.
Lithography.
Lithography.
Litigant.
Litigant.
Litigate.
Litigate.
Litigation.
Litigation.
The threat of litigation can be a deciding factor in some business decisions.
Litigious.
Litigious.
A litigious society.
Litmus.
Litmus.
Litmus paper.
Litmus paper.
Litmus test.
Litmus test.
The mayoral election is regarded as the litmus test for the integrity of the electoral process.
Litre.
Liter.
A litre of water. A litre bottle of wine. The Ford's 2.8 litre engine.
Litter.
Litter.
People who drop litter can be fined in some cities.
A town with a litter problem.
A litter of kittens.
Cat litter.
A litter tray.
A litter of notes, papers and textbooks were strewn on the desk.
Clothes littered the floor. Clothes littered the floor. The desk was littered with papers. Recent business news has been littered with stories of companies failing.
Litter bin.
Litter bin.
Litterbug.
Litterbug. Little. Little.
A little house.
A cake decorated with little flowers.
She was cutting the meat up into little bits.
A little tiny puppy.
I'd like to buy him a little something to thank him. It could be a nice little business. A useful little gadget.
It was another of her silly little jokes.
A boring little man.
The poor little thing had hurt its wing.
With a little bit of luck, we should finish by 5 o'clock.
I'm going to give you a little bit of advice.
Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was a little bit disappointed.
You could have a little sleep in the car.
We walked a little way along this path. We walked a little way along this path.
He arrived a little while ago. He arrived a little while ago.
We didn't have toys like this when I was little. We didn't have toys like this when I was little.
Two little boys playing in the street.
Mum, I'm 17. I'm not your little girl any longer.
Her little brother and sister were fighting again.
A little smile. Niccolo gave a little nod of his head.
Isn't time to discuss every little detail.
She gets very angry over little things.
There's just that little matter of the £5,000 you owe me. There's just that little matter of the £5,000 you owe me.
Working fewer hours will make life just that little bit easier for me.
There's little doubt in my mind that he's guilty. There's little doubt in my mind that he's guilty. I paid little attention to what the others were saying.
Little is known about the causes of the problem.
Changes in the law have done little to improve the situation. Changes in the law have done little to improve the situation.
Little of their wealth now remains. Little of their wealth now remains.
There's very little money left.
Many of the students speak little or no English.
He knew little or nothing about fixing cars.
My lawyer advised me to say as little as possible.
He did precious little to help. The laboratory tests are of little real value.
Fortunately, I had a little time to spare.
Susan spoke a little French.
A little over half the class can swim.
He walked on a little and then turned back.
Would you like a little more milk in your coffee?
The city is regaining a little of its former splendour. The city is regaining a little of its former splendour.
Prices for his paintings start from as little as £100.
The weather can change completely in as little as half an hour. We did what little we could to help.
I handed over what little money I had left. A little kindness goes a long way.
She trembled a little as she spoke.
He was a little surprised at her request.
We'll have to wait a little longer to see what happens.
The town has changed little over the years.
The situation has improved very little.
A little-known corner of the world.
His voice was little more than a whisper.
Little did I know that the course of my life was about to change. Little by little, he became accepted by the family.
Graham was more than a little frightened by what he had seen. Graham was more than a little frightened by what he had seen.
Little Englander.
Little Englander.
Little finger.
Little finger.
Little people.
Little people.
It's the little people who bear the brunt of taxation. It's the little people who bear the brunt of taxation.
Literal.
Literal.
Liturgical.
Liturgical.
Liturgy.
Liturgy.
Livable.
Livable.
Live.
Live.
They lived in Holland for 10 years. He lives just across the street from me. We live only a few miles from the coast. A rather odd family came to live next door to us. As soon as I saw the place, I knew I didn't want to live there. Does Paul still live here? We're still looking for somewhere to live. They've finally found a place to live. My grandmother came to live with us when I was 10. Most 17-year-olds still live at home. I'm quite happy living alone.
The house has 3,600 square feet of living space.
I ran away from home and lived rough for 9 months.
These particular birds live on only one island in the Pacific.
He lived in the 18th century.
She lived at a time when women were not expected to work. She lived at a time when women were not expected to work.
Gladstone lived during a period of great social change. He's probably the best journalist who ever lived. He's probably the best journalist who ever lived.
Without light, plants couldn't live.
He is extremely ill and not expected to live.
The baby only lived a few hours.
People on average are living much longer than before. People on average are living much longer than before.
I'll never forget this for as long as I live.
My grandmother lived to 85.
He knows he's only got a few months to live.
She lived to the age of 79.
He knows he's only got a few months to live.
He did not live to see the realization of his dream.
The people in this country just want to live in peace.
People should not live in fear of crime.
We live in hope that a cure will be found. We live in hope that a cure will be found. The two communities live peacefully alongside each other. The two communities live peacefully alongside each other.
She thought that she would get married and live happily ever after.
Some people like to live dangerously. Some people like to live dangerously.
Most elderly people prefer to live independently if they can.
They earn enough money to live well.
I just want to live my life in my own way.
He's not well enough to live a normal life.
She lives a very busy life.
He had chosen to live the life of a monk.
She's now in Hollywood, living a life of luxury.
I have always tried to live by my faith. I have always tried to live by my faith.
We struggle on, living from day to day.
He was tired of living out of a suitcase. He was tired of living out of a suitcase.
Fishing is the way their families have lived for generations. Fishing is the way their families have lived for generations.
They live by hunting and killing deer.
She wanted to get out and live a little.
We're beginning to live at last.
He lives in a fantasy world.
She lived through her children's lives.
You must stop living in the past. You must stop living in the past.
Where do these cups live? Where do these cups live? Those big dishes live in the cupboard next to the fridge.
Democracy still lives.
His name will live forever.
That day will always live in my memory.
The White House living quarters.
His tuition is paid, but he'll work to cover his living expenses. His tuition is paid, but he'll work to cover his living expenses. Her mother disapproved of the living arrangements, saying that 2 girls living with 4 boys was bound to cause problems. Her mother disapproved of the living arrangements, saying that 2 girls living with 4 boys was bound to cause problems. Her mother disapproved of the living arrangements, saying that 2 girls living with 4 boys was bound to cause problems.
Sam was living it up in London.
I knew that I could not continue to live a lie.
She's been living on borrowed time for the last year. She's been living on borrowed time for the last year. She's been living on borrowed time for the last year.
Politics is the stuff I live and breathe.
You haven't lived until you've tasted champagne. You haven't lived until you've tasted champagne.
She's been living on borrowed time for the last year.
Politics is the stuff I live and breathe.
You haven't lived until you've tasted champagne.
If you marry him, you'll live to regret it.
Hopefully, the company will live to fight another day.
She believes in living life to the full. She believes in living life to the full.
We lived from hand to mouth, never knowing where the next meal was coming from.
I always wanted to be a famous singer, and now I'm living the dream.
Long live free education.
She'll never live that down.
He lived for his art.
She had nothing left to live for.
She lives for the day when she can have a house of her own. She lives for the day when she can have a house of her own.
Sometimes it can be easier if you have a nanny who lives in.
Mum used to live off the interest from her savings. Mum used to live off the interest from her savings.
Dad lost his job, and we had to live off welfare. Dad lost his job, and we had to live off welfare.
Most people in the countryside live off the land.
Alice's memory will live on.
I don't know how they managed to live on £55 a week.
The number of families who live on benefits.
They live on bread and potatoes.
He practically lives on fish and chips.
Most home helps prefer to live out.
The money enabled them to live out their dreams. The money enabled them to live out their dreams.
He lived out his life in solitude.
The generation that lived through the Second World War.
It was hard to describe the nightmare she had lived through.
They lived together for 2 years before they got married.
The bank is insolvent and will be unable to live up to its obligations. The film has certainly lived up to my expectations.
You have to learn to live with stress.
He has lived with his illness for most of his life. He has lived with his illness for most of his life.
She's living with her boyfriend now.
That episode has lived with me all my life.
Live.
Live.
Experiments on live animals. Protesters want to stop the export of live sheep and cattle.
The number of live births per 1,000 population.
We were so excited to see real live elephants.
A live radio phone-in show.
There will be live TV coverage of tonight's big match. A lot of the bars have live music.
The band will be giving a live concert performance next week.
We'll be playing you a track from his new live album.
It's always different when you perform in front of a live audience. It's always different when you perform in front of a live audience.
Be careful, those wires are live.
They came across a field of live unexploded mines. They came across a field of live unexploded mines.
Troops fired live ammunition to disperse the crowd.
Drink driving is still very much a live issue.
She threw the paper onto the live coals.
Live.
Live.
The ceremony will be broadcast live on television.
The match will be shown live by the BBC.
I love their music, but I've never seen them perform live.
The band is playing live in Birmingham tonight.
Their latest CD was recorded live in New York.
Their new information retrieval system went live last month.
A new security project, which will go live in October. A new security project, which will go live in October.